What's up, guys? Today, we're about to dive into something seriously dark. We're going to explore the 10 most terrifying prisons on Earth. Places where nightmares become reality and the line between hell and reality just disappears. You know, those horror movies that keep you up at night. Well, they've got nothing on these places. We're talking about prisons where inmates pray for death as a mercy. Facilities so brutal that even the guards are afraid to walk the corridors. Places where the screams of torture have become as normal as the sound of birds chirping outside your window. From the infamous Alcatraz Island to Syria's White Tomb. From Brazil's blood-soaked Carandiru to Russia's frozen hell, Black Dolphin. These aren't just prisons. They're monuments to human cruelty. A place they said no one could escape from. Welcome to Alcatraz. Rising from the foggy waters of San Francisco Bay, there's this massive rock that'll give you chills. Yeah, I'm talking about Alcatraz, the escape-proof prison. Just imagine being locked up only 1.5 miles from freedom, but knowing you'll probably never make it. This place was so hardcore, it had tough guys like Al Capone shaking in their boots. No joke, even the most dangerous gangsters in America were terrified of the Devil's Island. Here's the crazy part. The real torture wasn't the violence. It was all psychological warfare. These guys could literally see the lights of San Francisco from their cells. On quiet nights, they could even hear music and people partying in the city. Talk about messing with your head. And get this, their cells were tiny, like 9 by 5 feet. That's smaller than most bathrooms. You couldn't even stretch your arms out all the way. But check this out. In its 29-year history, only 14 escape attempts were made, involving 36 prisoners total. 2 were caught, 5 were shot dead, 24 failed. But here's where it gets wild. What happened to those other 5? The most famous escape attempt in 1962, with Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, is still a mystery to this day. These guys were next-level creative. They made saws from spoons and toothbrushes, crafted dummy heads, and built a raft. Like, this wasn't just an escape plan. This was some real prison break stuff. Did those 5 inmates actually make it out alive? Or did the freezing waters of the San Francisco Bay become their final resting place? Drop your theories in the comments below. And folks, you might want to hold on to something tight, because we're about to enter Thailand's most notorious nightmare, the Kwang Prison. They call it the Bangkok Hilton, but trust me, this is no vacation spot. Get ready for what might be the most disturbing prison conditions you've ever heard of. Just north of Bangkok, there's a place that makes even the toughest criminals tremble, Kwang Prison. Since 1931, this nightmare factory, nicknamed Hell on Earth, has been housing Thailand's most dangerous criminals. But guys, this isn't your regular prison. This is a place where hope goes to die. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine being locked up in overcrowded cells where the heat is unbearable and you're chained. Yeah, you heard that right. Chained 24/7. These aren't just any chains. We're talking heavy leg irons that eat into your skin. Foreign prisoners? They've got it even worse. Imagine being thousands of miles from home, not understanding the language, and fighting for survival every single day. But here's the really messed up part. Death row inmates are forced to watch executions. Think about that for a second. Watching someone get executed, knowing you might be next. The guards actually make other prisoners watch. And get this, when you first arrive, they weld these chains onto your legs for 3 months straight. No breaks, no exceptions. The food? If you can call it that. Most prisoners survive on what their families bring them, if they're lucky enough to have family nearby. If not, well, hope you like rice soup with bugs. The cells are so packed, inmates have to sleep shoulder to shoulder, often in pools of their own sweat. And don't even get me started on the gangs. Violence isn't just common here, it's a way of life. Guards? They're more likely to join in than stop it. Some prisoners go insane from the conditions. Others just disappear. Think ADX Florence is hardcore? Man, This place makes it look like a summer camp. Speaking of which, you'd better prepare yourself, because we're heading to America's most secure prison next, ADX Florence. And trust me, what you're about to hear might just keep you up at night. Hidden in the remote mountains of Colorado, there's a place they call the Living Tomb. ADX Florence, America's only supermax prison. This isn't just any prison, folks. This is where America keeps the worst of the worst. Al-Qaeda terrorists, cartel bosses, you name it. And what happens behind these concrete walls? Let me tell you, it's darker than any prison movie you've ever seen. Picture this. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in concrete boxes smaller than your parking space, just 12 by 7 feet. Windows? More like slits in the wall that only show a tiny piece of sky. And here's the crazy part. These cells are designed so inmates can't even talk to each other. The walls are soundproof, completely cutting off all human contact. Your only friends? The voices in your head. Everything, and I mean everything, is made of concrete. Beds, desks, toilets, all solid concrete. The only contact with the outside world is through a tiny slot where they slide in food. El Chapo, the Boston bomber, the 9/11 plotters, they're all here, locked in absolute solitude. The cells are so well designed that prisoners can't even hear guards walking in the corridors. Want to know the most insane part? That 1 hour of exercise they get. It's in another concrete box, just 12 by 12 feet, with a metal mesh ceiling. The only human contact is when guards handcuff you to take you there. Some inmates go years, even decades, without touching another human being. Yeah, you heard that right. How long could your mind survive in total isolation like this? One day in ADX Florence is enough to break most people. And while we're talking about breaking people, buckle up, because we're heading to Russia's Black Dolphin prison next. And trust me, what they do there makes this place look like a daycare center. On the edge of Russia, right by the Kazakhstan border, there's a prison so terrifying that even the devil himself wouldn't dare enter. Black Dolphin. And guys, this isn't just any prison. When the world's most savage killers are shaking in their boots before entering, you know it's bad. But why do they call it Black Dolphin? And why do inmates call this place the living hell? This is home to Russia's 700 most dangerous criminals. We're talking serial killers, terrorists, and, I kid you not, even cannibals. Every single inmate here has killed at least 15 people. But the scariest thing? It's not the inmates. It's the prison itself. Get this. Every time prisoners move, they're blindfolded and forced to walk bent over. Why? So they can't memorize the prison layout. Guards check the cells every 15 minutes, watching inmates even while they sleep. Here's the really twisted part. The cells are so tiny, 3 steps, and you hit the wall. Windows? Just a few holes behind steel plates. These guys only see real daylight twice a year. They even eat standing up because there's no room to sit. And in winter, temperatures drop to 40 degrees. That's not a typo, folks. -40. Every cell has 2 steel doors. The first one has to close before the second one opens. The walls, 20 feet thick. Their only entertainment is 1 hour of TV per day. And guess what? It's only state propaganda channels. Guards say some inmates have been in the dark so long, they're actually scared of sunlight now. In 2008, one inmate said something that'll give you chills. This is worse than death. When you die, the pain ends. But here, you die every day, every hour. The guards say, even birds can't fly out of here. And they're right. No one has escaped in 25 years. Because this isn't just a prison. It's a machine designed to break the human soul. Just imagine spending 23 hours a day in a cell with almost no light. Is Russia's Black Dolphin really about rehabilitation? Or is it just pure revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you think this is harsh, wait till you see what goes down in Venezuela's La Sabaneta Prison. Trust me, You might want to grab a bucket for this one. Welcome to La Sabaneta Prison in Venezuela, where the inmates run the asylum. Literally. This place is so out of control that even the guards are too scared to go inside. And no, I'm not exaggerating. The inmates are in charge here. And what they've created is basically hell on earth. Here's the math. This prison was built for 3,000 people, but now it's crammed with over 5,000 inmates. But that's not even the craziest part. Inside, it's not a prison. It's a war zone. Every cell block has its own weapons, its own rules. And get this, the guards, they just watch from the outside while gang leaders run the show. And oh boy, wait till you hear this. You know how the inmates get their weapons? Through corrupt guards. We're not talking about makeshift shivs here. We're talking handguns, homemade bombs, and even machine guns. Last year's search turned up over 200 weapons, and that's just what they found. Life inside? It's pure savagery. New inmates have two choices: join a gang or die. There's at least one fight every day, and 2 to 3 inmates die every month. But here's the most shocking part. Families live here too. Yeah, you heard that right. There are children in this hellhole. In Venezuela, families don't want to leave their loved ones alone, so they move in with them. Can you imagine raising kids in a place where gunfights are as common as breakfast? One inmate said in 2018, "This isn't a prison, it's a zoo. But the animals are running it, and the zookeepers are too scared to come inside." The worst part? Most of these inmates haven't even been convicted yet. They're still waiting for their trials, which means potentially innocent people are rotting in this madhouse. Think about that for a second. Trying to survive in a prison controlled by armed gangs, with kids running around. And speaking of survival, you better steel yourself, because we're heading to New York's most notorious hellhole, Rikers Island. And let me tell you, what happens there will make your skin crawl. Just a stone's throw from the glittering skyline of Manhattan, there's an island that New Yorkers call the hellhole, Rikers Island. Since 1932, this place has been swallowing up inmates and spitting out broken souls. But what makes this prison so notorious that even hardened criminals pray they don't end up here? Picture this: a facility built for 10,000 people, now bursting at the seams. But it's not just about overcrowding. Inside Rikers, violence isn't just common, it's a way of life. The guards? They're either part of the problem or too overwhelmed to stop it. In 2022 alone, there were over 2,000 stabbings and slashings. That's more than 5 attacks every single day. Here's where it gets really dark. Inmates are often locked up for days, sometimes weeks, in tiny cells without any human contact. They call it punitive segregation, but let's call it what it really is: torture. The mentally ill, they make up about 40% of the population, but instead of getting help, they're thrown into solitary confinement. But wait, it gets worse. The facility is literally falling apart. Mold everywhere, rats running wild, and during summer, temperatures in the cells can hit 100 degrees. In winter, inmates freeze because the heating barely works. And get this, some people spend years here without even being convicted of a crime. They're just waiting for their day in court because they can't afford bail. A former inmate once said, "Rikers isn't a jail. It's a gladiator school where only the strong survive." And he wasn't exaggerating. Young kids arrested for minor crimes are thrown in with hardened criminals. Many come out worse than when they went in, if they come out at all. In the past 2 years, over 30 people have died here. Some from violence, others from neglect. Think about this. In the heart of America's richest city, there's an island where human rights go to die. And while we're talking about places where humanity is forgotten, brace yourselves, because we're heading to Brazil's infamous Carandiru Prison next. And trust me, what happened there will make Rikers look like a summer camp. Rising 9 stories high in the heart of São Paulo stands a monument to human cruelty, Carandiru Prison. For 36 years, this concrete nightmare was Brazil's bloodiest prison. But nothing could prepare anyone for what happened on October 2nd, 1992, when 111 inmates were massacred in cold blood. How did a prison turn into a slaughterhouse? Let me tell you this bone-chilling story. This place was built for 3,000 inmates but crammed in over 8,000. Picture sardines in a can, but make it human. Inmates slept in shifts, some in bathrooms, others in corridors. And here's the really sick part. Disease was everywhere. AIDS, tuberculosis, skin infections. At least one person died every single day just from being sick. But wait, it gets worse. The prison was so infested with rats that inmates had to take turns staying awake at night to keep from getting eaten alive. Medical care. One doctor for 8,000 inmates. If you got hurt or sick, tough luck. There was a saying among prisoners, you either leave Carandiru as a murderer, or you leave in a body bag. Then came October 2nd, 1992, the day that shocked the world. After a fight broke out, police stormed the prison and, get this, executed 111 inmates. Witnesses say they shot prisoners who had already surrendered, made them kneel and shot them execution style. The corridors literally turned into rivers of blood. The worst part? Most of these guys hadn't even been convicted of any crime yet. The prison was demolished in 2002, but survivors still wake up screaming from nightmares. There was another saying in Carandiru, when hell is full, the sinners are sent here. Most survivors are still in therapy today because some trauma just never goes away. Just imagine living in a place where human life means absolutely nothing. And speaking of places where humanity is forgotten, hold on to your seats, because we're heading to San Quentin Prison next. If you thought this was bad, wait till you hear what goes down in California's death row. On the shores of San Francisco Bay stands a dark castle that's been haunting inmates' nightmares for 170 years. San Quentin. This isn't just any prison, folks. This is America's largest death row, and they don't call it the waiting room of death for nothing. Right now, over 700 inmates are sitting in tiny cells, just waiting to die. But here's the twisted part. They can actually see the lights of San Francisco from their cells. Imagine that, watching freedom sparkle just a few miles away every night, knowing you'll never touch it again. Talk about psychological torture. The last corridor to the execution chamber. Inmates call it the Green Mile. Yeah, just like the movie. And get this, 422 people have taken their final walk down this hallway. They used to have a gas chamber. Now it's lethal injection. Different method, same result. These guys spend an average of 20 years waiting to die. Every morning they wake up wondering, is today my day? Back in 1937, a guard wrote something chilling. They die twice here, once in their dreams, and once when they wake up. Violence is through the roof. Just last year, 6 people died in gang fights alone. But here's the most messed up part. Some inmates have been waiting for death so long, they've forgotten how to live. This place has housed America's most infamous killers. Charles Manson, Sirhan, you name it. But listen to this. One guy spent 50 years on death row before being proven innocent. Can you imagine? Half a century wondering if each day would be your last. And while we're talking about places where death is a daily companion, get ready, because we're heading to Kuzi-Kor infamous Camp22 Prison next. And trust me, what happened behind those walls will make your blood run cold. Hidden deep in North Korea's mountains lies a place so terrifying, its existence was denied for decades. Camp22. This isn't just a prison. It's a human experiment lab where 3 generations of families are imprisoned for one person's crime. Want to know why they call it the Black Gate of Hell? This massive concentration camp holds around 50,000 prisoners. But here's the truly horrifying part. Many were born here and will die here. North Korea's 3 generations of punishment rule means if you're accused of a crime, your children, parents, and grandchildren are all imprisoned too. Entire families, living and dying behind these walls. But the most disturbing part? The human experiments. Former guards talk about entire families being used as test subjects for chemical and biological weapons. They're locked in glass chambers, while scientists observe their agonizing deaths. Children born with deformities due to chemical exposure are killed immediately. Women who become pregnant in the camp are forced to abort their babies or watch them be murdered at birth. Daily life. Pure horror. Prisoners work 16-hour days in mines and farms, surviving on just a few spoons of rotten corn per day. Those who collapse from exhaustion are shot on spot. The death rate? About 20% of inmates die each year from starvation, disease, or execution. Bodies are dumped in mass graves or burned in furnaces. A former guard described it best. In Camp 22, you stop seeing prisoners as humans. They're just walking corpses. The only difference between the living and the dead is that the living still breathe. Most horrifying of all, this camp is still operating today, while the world turns a blind eye. Think about this. There are people right now, at this very moment, being tortured and experimented on in Camp 22. And the worst part? Many of them don't even know why they're there. Their only crime? Being related to someone who allegedly spoke against the regime. Drop your thoughts in the comments below about how a place like this can still exist in our modern world. In the mountains north of Damascus stands a white building that Syrians call the White Tomb. This is Sedneya Prison, Assad's most brutal torture factory. And guys, only 2 out of every 10 people who go in come out alive. What happens inside these walls is about to show you just how dark humanity can get. When new prisoners arrive, they're given what guards call a welcome party. Blindfolded and beaten for hours, then dragged to the tire room. Their bodies are folded into car tires and whipped until they pass out. The guards call it the Syrian welcome package. But here's the really horrific part. Cells built for one person hold 15 to 20 inmates. They're so cramped that prisoners have to sleep in shifts. Water? 1 dirty cup per day. Food? Just moldy bread and potato peels. It gets so bad that prisoners lick each other's wounds just to survive. In Sedneya, silence isn't golden. It's deadly. Coughing, sneezing, even moaning in pain is forbidden. The punishment? Being beaten until you die. A former inmate told us, "Every night, we heard the screams of torture. Every morning, we watched body bags being carried out, sometimes 50 in a day. They called every death a heart attack. Since 2011, an estimated 100,000 people have died here. The most heartbreaking part? Most were young people in their 20s, students, journalists, doctors. Their only crime? Criticizing the regime. The torture is so brutal that prisoners see death as a mercy. And guys, this brings us to the end of our journey through the world's most terrifying prisons. These aren't just buildings. They're monuments to human cruelty. From Alcatraz to Sedneya, we've seen how dark humanity can get when power goes unchecked. What prison should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. And if this journey through humanity's darkest places has opened your eyes, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Because trust me, we've got more shocking stories coming your way.